With your Bibles open, let me read. But from the beginning of creation, Jesus is answering their question about divorce. And basically, he says Moses allowed divorce because of the hardness of their hearts. But this is not God's original intention. But from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. And for this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and shall be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no man separate. Now, as we see in Mark chapter 10, beginning with verse 6, Jesus answering their question about divorce. And basically, he says Moses allowed them to give a certificate of divorce because of the hardness of their hearts. But this was not God's original intention. But from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. God is establishing at that point in creation gender. Gender is not a fabrication of man. It is not a construct of our society. It is woven into the fabric of the creation of the universe by a God who says they shall be male and female. Now, Jesus is quoting from over in chapter 1 of Genesis, where God says, from the beginning, God created them male and female, and they are created in his image. So both male and females are created in God's image. But God has determined gender. And it is at the very moment of conception that God determines gender, male and female. So the first ancient boundary, Jesus says, and notice this is Jesus, the Son of God, giving this boundary. And he knows it because he created male and female. In the beginning, God established there shall be masculinity and there shall be femininity. Now, we are not free to change those constructs. They are there because God has established them. Well, what about the gender confusion that we're seeing in our day? And what we're seeing is people saying, I was born a female in a man's body. Or, I was born a male in a female body. And therefore, I'm really a female. Well, what's going on there? Well, scientists have never been able to isolate a gene that is responsible for same-sex attraction. And so what we see, and what I'm convinced is, in these situations, we have a result of the fall of mankind. You remember when Adam sinned, all of creation fell into corruption. And we have what's called a sin nature. And there are many manifestations of this sin nature. Lying, adultery, fornication, murder, stealing, same-sex attraction, gender confusion. This is a part of the fallen nature of mankind. And so when you encounter someone who says, I was born in a male's body, but all of my interests, all of my desires are as a female would have. I want to dress like a female. I want to act like a female. Well, that's simply a manifestation of the sin nature. Just like if a person wants to commit adultery, wants to commit immorality sexually, that's just a part of their sin nature. That's their temptation. Now, we don't determine our temptation, circumstances, the sin nature, but we all have a particular area where we're tempted more than others. But what we must do as Christians is stand against that temptation in the power of God's Spirit, whether it be the temptation to lie, whether it be the temptation to steal, whether it be the temptation to commit immorality, whether it be the temptation to have same-sex attraction, whether it be the temptation to act contrary to God's assignment to you at birth. These are just manifestations of the sin nature. They can and must be resisted in the power of God's Spirit. And so when you have someone who says, my body does not match my desires, then that person, and if it's one of your loved ones, you must say to them, look, God has made you and assigned you at conception to be a male or a female. And these desires that you have that are contrary to God's sexual assignment for you are just manifestations of the sin nature. And by the power of God, you must resist those temptations, not give in to them. Now, there are men who are creative. There are men who tend to be, as we say, on the artsy side. And that's fine. We need creative males. We need males that rather be reading, rather be drawing, rather be doing other things than out playing football or some sport. That's okay. But to want to dress like a female when you're a male, that's contrary to God's teaching, and that must be resisted in the power of God's Spirit. And you don't condemn your child because he's tempted this way. He can't help his temptation. But what you must do is help him to see the power of God to resist that temptation and to develop say no to that temptation and dress like a man. That doesn't mean his temptation's going to go away when he becomes a Christian any more than your temptation went away. But you must resist it in the power of God's Spirit. And as it was said in the book, much gender confusion will go away when puberty hits. And this idea that children can decide and determine what gender they are in elementary school is ridiculous. They don't know and shouldn't be allowed. The answer as a Christian parent is God made you a male, God made you a female. There's nothing wrong with females that are more athletically inclined, that like to go out and hunt and like to do things that men do. That's okay. But to dress like a man, to have a mastectomy, and to try to go through gender transition surgery, that's contrary to God's will. And there simply must resist the temptation of the flesh. So gender is an ancient boundary that we must maintain. We must not budge on that at all. God is the one who makes gender assignment even at conception. The second ancient boundary is marriage. Again, for thousands and thousands of years, nobody's had a question. Marriage is that joining together of one man and one woman. It's only in recent years that that's been under attack. But marriage is just that. Jesus goes on to say in Mark 10, for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no man separate. So marriage is between one man and one woman. Not two men, not two women, not one man and two women, not one man, three women, not two men and one woman, but one man, one woman for life. Jesus says, for this reason a man and a woman shall be joined together and become one flesh. And I might add that becoming of one flesh takes place at the physical consummation, the sexual act of marriage. Now, that means sex is to wait until marriage. Sex is not to take place until marriage has come about. Now, men, you need to explain to your daughters about this. They don't realize how men are. A man, most men, in particular take non-Christian men, they can have sex with many different women and never become emotionally attached. But for the female, there is a deeper emotional attachment when it comes to sex. And what I believe God, recognizing the desire men have for sex, has said, sure, you want to have sex with her, but you cannot do so with my blessing until after you have committed yourself to her in marriage. You've committed to be her husband, to care for her, to provide for her. And then and only then will you have my blessing upon sex. Now, girls wanting to have that man satisfied, that guy they're dating, will give their body to him and give him sex and then wonder why he doesn't ask them to marry him. The old saying goes, why buy the cow when you get the milk for free? Girls don't understand that one of the driving forces for a Christian man to get married is his desire to have sex. And God said this is what God intends. He intends for the man to have to wait until he's committed to that woman. And so teach your daughters that don't give that man that sex and then wonder why he doesn't want to get married. I mean, what would he have accomplished by marriage except more responsibility, to have to care for somebody, to have to provide for somebody? So most guys would say, why would I want to do that when I've already get into sex now? And so we need to train our daughters that the way men are is the reason that God has said only after that man is willing to make that commitment to live with you as your mate until death, that he is free to partake of the joy of the sexual union between male and female. And so we must maintain that ancient boundary of marriage as well as the ancient boundary of gender. I hope you have a great discussion, and we look forward to talking to you again next week. God bless.